He was bleeding on that floor, and instead of asking for help, Bobbi Dlomo asked for forever. If you watched last night's episode of The Four of Us on ETV and you are still not okay, welcome, because none of us are okay either, and today we are breaking down every single second of episode 32, the episode where Bobbi comes home from hospital and tells the whole family, and eventually the whole of Mzansi, that he and Ndumi are getting married. Stay with me till the end, because there are small details in this episode that a lot of people scrolled past, and I promise you they matter more than you think. Let's set the scene properly for anyone who is joining this recap without having watched Monday's episode first, because Tuesday's episode really only makes sense once you understand what happened the night before. On Monday, Bobbi took a knife that was meant for Ndumi. He stepped in front of her, he got stabbed protecting her, and while he was literally bleeding out on the ground, waiting for help to arrive, he looked up at her and asked her to marry him. It was reckless, it was dramatic, it was completely on brand for a man who has spent his whole life making decisions with his heart before his head, and Ndumi, shaking, crying, terrified she was about to lose him, said yes. That is where we left off, and that is the emotional hangover this episode had to deal with. Episode 32 opens with Bobbi being discharged from hospital. He is bandaged, he is a little slower than usual, but he is very much alive, and the first thing on his mind is not rest, it is not recovery, it is making sure that the promise he made while he thought he might be dying does not get treated like something that only counted in the moment. That tells you everything about who Bobbi is as a character right now. A lot of viewers online have been saying that a proposal made under that kind of pressure should not really count, that you cannot trust a decision made while someone thinks they are dying, and honestly that is a fair point to raise, but what this episode does cleverly is show us that Bobbi wakes up the next day and doubles down instead of backing away. He does not wait for the dust to settle. He does not use his injury as an excuse to quietly let the moment pass. He comes home and he announces it to the family, out loud, in front of everyone, which is a very different thing from a whispered promise between two people in a moment of panic. Now here is where the episode gets interesting, because announcing an engagement in this family was never going to be simple, and the writers clearly know that, because they use this moment to reveal something else that has been quietly building in the background, which is that Dlomo Motors, Bobbi's own business, is rebranding under new management, essentially being restructured as DM. On the surface that might look like unrelated business news dropped into an emotional family episode, but if you have been paying attention to the last few weeks, you will know that nothing on this show happens by accident. Bobbi has been under serious financial pressure, there have been questions swirling about the company's cars, and the timing of a rebrand landing on the exact same day as his marriage announcement feels less like coincidence and more like a man trying to control the narrative on every front of his life at once. He gets to walk into that family gathering looking like a man who has just survived a near-death experience, secured the love of his life, and is now steering his business into a fresh new era. It is a lot of image management happening in a very short space of time, and if this show has taught us anything, it is that when Bobbi is managing his image this hard, something underneath is not as solid as he wants people to believe. Which brings us to Basani, because while Bobbi is upstairs basking in his engagement glow, Basani is doing what Basani does best, which is quietly refusing to let anything slide. She has noticed the luxury cars moving through the family business, and she is not buying whatever explanation has been floating around. In this episode she starts properly digging into the paperwork, looking into audits connected to those cars, and there is a small but very telling scene where she catches Poppy looking a little too relaxed about the whole situation, a little too comfortable, like a man who is quietly benefiting from something he should probably be worried about. If you know this show, you know that Basani is the character who eventually finds the receipts, literally and figuratively, so when she starts asking questions this early, you can be fairly confident this is the first thread of a storyline that is going to unravel slowly over the next few weeks and eventually blow up in Bobbi's face. Then we have Mathapelo, And honestly, this subplot is doing something quite smart, because it takes a character who has largely been comic relief and gently nudges her toward something a lot more serious. In this episode, she is dealing with money stress of her own, and instead of asking for help, she turns to gambling, placing a small bet almost as a joke, and walking away with 500 rand. It is filmed almost lightly. There is a little triumphant moment, a little laugh, and that is exactly what makes it uncomfortable if you know anything about how these patterns start. A small win early on is often how these storylines hook a character in, and it usually is not long before the wins get bigger and the losses get worse. I do not think the show is trying to make a heavy after-school special statement here in this one episode, but it is planting a seed, and if the teasers for the rest of the month are anything to go by, this is going to grow into a much bigger arc for her. Let's go back to the emotional center of the episode though, because that is really what everyone came here for, and that is Bobbi and Ndumi. What makes their scenes in this episode land the way they do is that the show does not let the proposal feel like the end of a story. It very deliberately frames it as the beginning of a much messier one. Bobbi is not simply happy, he is relieved, he is almost frantic in the way he wants to lock this engagement in before anything or anyone can talk Ndumi out of it. And Ndumi herself is caught in a strange place emotionally, because she said yes in a moment of pure terror and love, and now she has to sit with that decision in the cold light of day, surrounded by his family, some of whom clearly do not think she belongs in this picture at all. That tension is where Lethabo comes in, and if you have been watching this show from the beginning, you already know why this is such a devastating moment for her character. Lethabo is not some random side character reacting to gossip. She is the mother of Bobbi's children, she has been by his side for 16 years, she has waited through everything, every excuse, every delay, every version of him telling her that marriage would happen eventually, and now she is watching him propose to someone else after knowing her for only a matter of months. In this episode we do not get the full explosion yet, that is clearly being saved for the episodes coming later this week, but we get the setup, the quiet devastation on her face when she hears the announcement, the way she has to hold herself together in front of the family because falling apart publicly is not something her position allows her to do. There is a particular shot of her standing slightly apart from the celebration, present in the room but completely outside of the joy, and that visual choice alone tells you where the storyline is heading. What I find genuinely well done here is that the show does not ask you to hate Bobbi for this, and it does not ask you to see Lethabo as simply a bitter woman standing in the way of true love either. Both readings are available to you depending on where your sympathies sit, and that ambiguity is exactly why this triangle has become the center of so much conversation since the show premiered. Bobbi is a man who has spent years avoiding commitment with the person who gave him everything, and the moment he finally chooses to commit, he chooses someone else entirely, someone who did not even want him at first. There is something almost cruel in that timing, even if Bobbi himself is not being deliberately cruel. He is just being exactly who he has always been, someone who follows what he feels in the moment rather than what he has built with someone over years, and this episode lets both women exist in that reality without picking a side for us. I also want to talk about Bobbi's brother for a moment, because his reaction in this episode is one of the more grounded moments in an otherwise heightened, emotional hour. While everyone else is either celebrating or quietly falling apart, he is the one voice in the room trying to slow things down, trying to get his brother to actually think about what he is doing to Lethabo and to the family as a whole. He is not condemning Bobbi outright, there is clearly real love and loyalty there, but he is also not pretending this is simple, and he says as much, gently pointing out that a man cannot just erase 16 years because he found someone new who makes him feel something different. It is a small role in this particular episode, but it matters, because it means the show has at least one character positioned as the moral center of the storyline, someone the audience can lean on when the family dynamics get too messy to sort through alone. Now let's talk pacing for a second, because I think this is actually one of the stronger episodes structurally that we have had in a while. The show moves between four fairly distinct threads in this single episode: the engagement and family reaction, the business rebrand and Busoni's suspicion, Mathapilo's gambling moment, and the quiet devastation building in Lethabo, and it manages to give each of them room to breathe without the episode feeling overstuffed. That is genuinely hard to do in a daily drama format where you are working with limited time per episode, and it is one of the reasons this show has been pulling in the kind of audience numbers it has since it premiered at the end of June. There is a reason people keep saying that every celebration on this show comes with consequences attached, and this episode is basically a perfect illustration of that idea in action. If we zoom out and think about where this is all heading, based on what we already know is coming later this week, it is clear that this engagement is not going to be a smooth road to a wedding. Lethabo is going to react, and not quietly. There are already signs that the ring itself is going to become a flashpoint, that Ndumi is going to have doubts of her own once the reality of stepping into this family properly sets in, and that Busoni is digging into those luxury cars, and that rebrand is eventually going to connect directly back to Bobbi in a way he is not going to be able to spin his way out of. Mathapilo's small win at the betting table is very unlikely to stay small. And knowing this show, the timing of all of this landing in the same stretch of episodes is not an accident, it is the writers setting up a slow-motion collision between Bobbi's personal happiness and every other part of his life that he has been quietly neglecting to get there. So where does that leave us as viewers heading into the rest of the week? I think the honest answer is that this episode gave us the high point before the fall. Bobbi got his moment, he got his yes. He got to stand in front of his family and feel like a man whose life is finally coming together, and the show let us sit in that happiness for exactly one episode before it is going to start pulling all of it apart, thread by thread. That is what keeps a show like this compelling, the fact that even the wins feel temporary, the fact that you can never quite relax into a happy moment because you already know the writers are setting up the next complication 3 scenes ahead. If you want my honest take, this was one of the stronger episodes of the run so far, not because of any single dramatic moment, but because of how much groundwork it quietly laid while still delivering the big emotional beat everyone was waiting for. It did not waste the proposal, it did not treat it as a throwaway cliffhanger resolution, it used it as a door into a much bigger set of problems that this family is about to have to face together. That is everything for today's review of The Four of Us, episode 32. 11th of August 2026. Let me know in the comments whether you think Ndumi actually says yes because she loves Bobbi, or because she was scared of losing him in that moment and has not fully processed what she agreed to. And let me know who you are actually rooting for in this triangle, because from the comments on the last few videos, this fanbase is genuinely split down the middle. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you are subscribed, because we will be back with a full recap the moment Lethabo's reaction episode airs, and based on everything set up here, that one is going to be a lot to talk about. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.